decades of business experience, and you understand how debt can fuel growth in the private sector for companies. What's different about debt at the federal level?
Well, the difference is in business, you get a return on investment or you don't make it. And you use equity and debt to fund those investments. You realize we don't have a capital budget in the federal government. I mean, we don't look at investments that way. We look at it as a cash flow decision entirely. And it's one of the reasons we've got this debt crisis right now. We've never looked at it that way.
So how should we be looking at it? What are you planning to do in your 2 terms in the Senate, presuming you get reelected, to change that conversation?
Well, first is to realize and put it in perspective, to realize that I think we're in a debt crisis. The quarter-point increase that the Fed just did in the Fed fund rate is about $50 billion of new interest for the federal government. If interest rates went back to their 30-year average, we'd be paying about $1 trillion in interest alone. That can't happen. So I'm talking about the perspective of this debt crisis and how it fits with the global security crisis. It really does undermine our ability to fulfill our mission to protect the national defense.
So there's a direct link here between our debt crisis and our foreign policy?
Well, there's no question about it. I mean, I think the world is more dangerous now on several levels than at any time in my lifetime. You have the rise of the Russian aggression. You have China aggressiveness. You have ISIS. And not only that, we have something we haven't seen before, and that's the threat of nuclear proliferation among rogue nations. And then if you look at the cyber warfare, the hybrid warfare that's being conducted right now in Eastern Europe, and also the arms race in space that we're not talking about. So I think it's a very dangerous time, and underpinning that is our ability to fund the national defense. And that's why I'm talking about this as a two-pronged crisis.
So you were telling me earlier that you've been traveling around, meeting heads of states, talking to leaders of different between our debt levels and our American foreign policy?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there are 2 things that I get from all these heads of state around the world. One is, and this is singularly universal, America needs to lead again. And the second thing is that we're telling Greece and others how they need to get their house in order financially. And a lot of people are telling us, look, you own about 1/3 of global corporate or government debt right now, United States, at $20 trillion. That's a lot. And a lot of people around the world are really concerned that we're not going to be able to live up to our commitments. In fact, we've created a world where our allies don't trust us and our enemies don't fear us because of that very issue.
So what do you say to them? How do you assuage them or tell them that work is being done in Washington?
Well, we're trying to find a way to get to the priorities. That's why I ran for the United States Senate. I had never done this before, but I feel like that this crisis has now reached a level where the people back home understand there's a real problem. And so they want us to focus on the priorities. That's one reason why I think you have such an unusual presidential race this time.
Yes.
Is that people are very frustrated by the lack of results in Washington.
That's a good point, and I want to bring in the idea that Washington is a broken place because according to Atlanta Journal-Constitution, you're known on Wall Street as a turnaround specialist, right? You were CEO of the Reebok brand, you're CEO of Dollar General. You know how to reap rewards for investors. So what does Washington need to do to turn around its current brand of being a broken place where things can't get done?
Well, first, we have to deal with the priorities. And right now, to solve the debt crisis, there are a few things that we need to do. First, the biggest contributor over the next 10 years is how we have to save Social Security and Medicare. They both run out, their trust funds run out of money in 15 years. Second, we have to develop a budget process that actually works. We don't fund the government in a routine way. There's much too much drama. People back home are worried about that, and we know that that's a problem. We have redundant agencies. The GAO has said that we have somewhere north of $300 billion of redundant agencies, and we've got to grow this economy. I mean, we have more people becoming disaffected because they're not participating in the economy right now. This is the weakest recovery in 70 years. Last year, as a matter of fact, more companies went out of business than were started. This is a real problem, and people back home know it. That's why I'm fighting to really make the changes up here that need to be made and to bring a sense of priority to our discussion and what we're really doing.
So given all of that, we're in the silly season right now as we head towards the November presidential elections. Can you work with the President Ted Cruz or President Donald Trump to do all this?
Well, you know, I'm a Republican, so anybody we put up on our side right now is going to be better than continuing on the failed policies of this administration. I think that's what we'll get out of the Democrats. This is a serious time for our country, and we can't afford to have 7 more years of failure in terms of fiscal policy. We've had monetary policy that should have stimulated this economy. It's not working primarily because of our lack of attention to the fiscal policies that aren't working.
What have you heard from the current Republican presidential candidates about how to fix fiscal policy?
Well, I think you hear them talking publicly now, but I have not endorsed anyone because I wanted to influence each campaign about the two crises that I'm talking about, and you now hear them talking about it in a way that they haven't maybe a few months ago. So I'm anxious to see how specific they get in the next couple of weeks, particularly as we go into Tuesday. This is a big day in Indiana.
Yes. Very quickly here, Senator, would you be able to support President Clinton if she takes up these ideas?
Absolutely not. You know, I feel like this is our process on the Republican side. I know the Republican ethos right now, the conservative posture that we stand for. And I'll say this, it's not just about the individual who's going to be in the White House. It's the few hundred people they're going to put in government. And I think you have to look very carefully at what's happening with those few hundred with regulatory mandates and executive orders right now.